My Pecha Kucha today is about Pentametron, a Twitter bot by the artist Ranjit Bhatnagar. I'll try to convince you of a few things. First, that Pentametron produces poetry worth reading. Second, that its model of authorship presents complex ethical issues. And finally, that it both celebrates and mocks the language of digital culture. The name Pentametron refers to iambic pentameter, which you probably encountered in school. Pentametron finds instances of iambic pentameter on Twitter and retweets them. The avatar for the bot is a picture of Shakespeare, and its tagline is itself a pentameter couplet, with algorithms subtle and discreet. I seek iambic writings to retweet. Each line of iambic pentameter has 5 iambs, 5 unstressed syllables interspersed with 5 stressed syllables. Shakespeare follows the pattern, but soft what light through yonder window breaks. But the form is prevalent throughout English poetry, from Chaucer to Milton to Pope to Wordsworth to Frost. The couplets produced by Pentametron are comparatively lowbrow. Its co-authors write about topics like McDonald's products and high school homework using a series of cliches. I really want to see Kentucky lose. I hate the healing process of tattoos. Some people's eyebrows really bother me. Your thoughts determine your reality. To produce its poetry, Pentametron follows a series of steps. First, it collects tweets from Twitter. Then it analyzes each tweet using a pronouncing dictionary, which accounts for stress. Pentameter lines get stored until a match is found using a rhyming dictionary. Then the bot retweets the rhymed couplet. A few more characteristic couplets. My Twitter isn't working like before. I'm broken pieces shattered on the floor. Not everyone deserves a second chance. It's Friday. Do the Happy Friday dance. Knife party on The Walking Dead tonight. A brighter day. A brighter day's in sight. The content here does not seem especially intellectual or sophisticated. Indeed, it seems to confirm the suspicions of people who think the internet is making people distracted and stupid. The novelist Jonathan Franzen, for example, has claimed that Twitter is full of yackers and tweeters and braggers who would do better to communicate in depth in the quiet and permanence of the printed word. To make the writing of yackers and tweeters and braggers poetry, Pentametron uses a crowdsourced model of authorship. The artist, algorithm, and unwitting human co-authors collaborate to produce poetry. 2 complications here. We don't usually think of bots as authors, and the human co-authors don't volunteer to write the poetry. Pentametron isn't the only kind of poetry being written today that uses language found on the internet. A movement called uncreative writing argues that poets should take found language and claim it as their own. Pentametron, on the other hand, retains markers of the identities of the tweet's original authors, a name, a username, an avatar image. It would be a mistake to ignore the original authors, because understanding their relationship to Pentametron proves crucial to how we read it. Is the bot celebrating digital culture and honoring those who it retweets, or is it taking silly language out of context and using it as a joke? Before I can answer that question, I want to consider a few key characteristics of Pentametron's poetry. First, I want to point out that Pentametron achieves what poets have been trying to do since Wordsworth, to create poetry from a selection of language really used by people. Pentametron finds the rhythms of poetry in the language of everyday life. Not only that, it also intersperses poetry into the language of everyday life. When, about 10 times a day, a Pentametron couplet springs up in the midst of my Twitter feed, I experience a sudden aesthetic respite, a break from the mundane flow of the monotonous digital feed. Sometimes it even seems to comment on the feed. Next, there's specificity of reference. Pentametron's lines accumulate a catalog of popular culture and consumer culture, from iPhones to Empire. It takes forever to redecorate. I really love the iOS 9 update. Why everybody cutting up tonight? They disrespecting Cookie left and right. Such specific references might seem too focused on irrelevant ephemeral culture. Does Papa John's deliver by canoe? Yo, I appreciate the real in you. I never tried a shamrock shake before. Don't see the point in trying anymore. The references document consumer products and prepackaged experiences. They also offer a vibrant snapshot of digital culture in the moment of its production. Another major feature of Pentametron's poetry I want to think about is dialogue. Sometimes scholars think of poetry as difficult language that speaks in a unitary voice. On Pentametron, though, Different varieties of English and even other languages get pulled into a conversation. Que lindo ver a mis amigos bien. Put money on Wisconsin yet again. Jahan Ramazani uses the term heteroglossia to describe the interaction of different kinds of voices in a single work of poetry. Poetry that emphasizes heteroglossia, he argues, is well equipped to represent a world in which individuals no longer define themselves by one national identity, but instead move around and create hybrid identities and hybrid Englishes. Hybrid heteroglossia, though, risks slipping into cultural appropriation. Even as Pentametron automatically credits its co-authors, it sometimes seems to temporarily try on their identities and language styles. Does Pentametron unethically appropriate a Puerto Rican identity when it retweets a line from the user, "I'm Puerto Rican"? And is retweeting someone else's language to a readership of 20,000 ethical in the first place? Twitter users might feel comfortable tweeting observations to their small group of followers, but don't a user's observations about ejaculation or self-assertions of Class A super bitchiness affect them differently when they have a larger audience? I bring up such ethical issues not to attack Pentametron, but to point out the rich set of issues around value, intention, originality, and voice Bhatnagar's bot raises. Even as I think these are issues worth exploring, I really do think Pentametron is great, that its poetry is worth reading, that what might seem like a novelty is actually important literature. I finally find Pentametron funny, but also poignantly poetic. For all its complexities, Pentametron's goals are romantic. It seeks not to mock the language of the people whose tweets it borrows, but to celebrate it, not to despair over the wasteland of digital culture, but to explore its aesthetic potential.